Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ask Evoke podcast. My name is John Frieh. I'm one of the coaches here at Evoke. And joining me today, two times in a row, Leif Godberson. We're going to be doing a special version of Reddit this week, or I guess this month, or of this podcast. We tried something a little different this time. We made a request for questions on Reddit, and we allowed everyone to submit their questions there. We still got some questions submitted either through the coach at Evoke Endurance email or through Instagram, but we let everyone kind of post their questions on Reddit, and we summarized them, and we're going to jump in and answer them as best we can today. So for everyone that submitted their questions, thank you. Hopefully we have time to answer your question. And if you guys like this format, we might do it again in the future, but mostly we're just going to try and continue to share some knowledge. Before we get into it, I have to congratulate Leif and specifically his athlete and partner, Sarah, who just won the Ure mixed climbing competition 2 years in a row, which is pretty rad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I have a minuscule part in Sarah's success. That is all her. She's very talented.
Congrats to Sarah, but also a little hat tip to coach. So very cool. We got a bunch of questions. Should we start in with we kind of tried to bucket them based on kind of subject matter. Should we start with maybe some aerobic drift test questions we got? Does that sound good?
Sure. Would you
Uh,
like me to read the first one to you, John?
if you'd like to, sir.
All right, here we go. So, my question is on heart rate drift to identify the aerobic threshold. In theory, it sounds like a good tool to use, but I can't help but feel it has limitations, especially when attempting to use in spaces like gyms where there's no cooling mechanism. Heart rate will rise in response to the heat of the room, and an increase in heart rate is just a natural response to fatigue, regardless of what zone you may be in. Thanks. What do you think, John?
I think that first and foremost, there's no such thing as a perfect test. Absolutely, someone could go to a laboratory and pay for a gas exchange test or one of the other types of tests, a lactate test, and likely potentially get slightly better results. They'd also be in a space that maybe was cooled. And so, yes, they might get a slightly better result. We like the drift test because it's good enough. And the large majority of athletes coming in the door often are nowhere near their aerobic potential, and as a result often need to repeat the test multiple times. In fact, a lot of our stock training plans have retests pretty frequently throughout the stock plan, and that's because as people are completing their workouts and getting that aerobic volume, they're seeing those increases. And so yes, the drift test is not perfect. However, in our experience, in my experience, it's good enough. And as far as the heat, yes, it's going to have a little bit of impact on the results, but unless you're training in a, I don't know, dungeon basement, someplace like just brutally hot, you might get a not the best result, but there could be arguments made that you're actually benefiting your training in other ways through heat effect. But for the most part, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think especially on the context of heat, um, if it is your first time doing a drift test, I would not also make it your first time running in that gym on the treadmill. To your point, John, often you'll retest it frequently. If you're worried about not being adapted to the heat, if you run on that treadmill 3 to 4 times a week in the similar conditions, in a few weeks you'll start to become heat adapted, and your heart rate will actually have less of a steep linear response. So that can be managed. And I mean, to be honest, you could also apply a bit of a fudge factor too if you're like profusely sweating, um, and like clearly heat is an enormous factor. I think you could probably just, factor that into your calculation. Um, yeah.
Perfect.
Or use a
Uh,
fan. Bring a
or use
fan.
a fan. Or
That
use a
that
fan.
would be the simplest.
Short and sweet. Next question. I'll be performing my first heart rate drift test in a month. Is it better to go in fatigued or fresh?
Probably fresh. I would say definitely. Yep. I don't
Totally
know. What do
agree.
you think? I can't see a scenario where you would want to do that fatigued. Unless you want to
Uh,
skew your results.
yeah.
I guess that could be useful.
Yes, and if for those of you who do the test and find that maybe you either had too much drift or um, just wasn't the best result that you wanted, and you realize you need to retest, and you're looking in, say, maybe subsequent weeks of the stock plan, try and find a day that ideally there's a really easy day before. Maybe it's a rest day, like Mondays are usually a rest day, or maybe there's like a short Z1 recovery effort on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. If you can kind of sneak in the test the day after that, that would probably be a really good
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to retest. So.
Hmm. And I think also thinking about not just the heart rate drift, but the intent of the test is you do 1 hour at a fixed pace or power, thinking about incline two. So you would want to be in a condition where you're going to finish that hour with something in the tank. And if you are maxing out at the 60-minute mark and you're on the ground, then regardless of even if your heart rate didn't drift, that probably is too hard and you exceeded your aerobic threshold.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Kind of a follow on to that one that you make a good point here is
hmm
the next question. My question is based on what protocol is best to identify first and second threshold for mountain runners using
hmm
gas exchange, VO2 max test. I would
hmm
assume keeping the treadmill at a 1 to 2% gradient and increased speed until the first threshold. Would be interested to know your thoughts.
That's a bit of a tricky question. So they're asking to identify the first and second threshold. So I'm assuming because it says VO2 max, they're talking about ventilatory thresholds. Um, there's multiple ways you can do it. If you're a mountain runner, you might want to even start at an incline and hold it fixed at an incline rather than modulating just the pace, because ultimately you want these tests to be as similar to the training you're going to be doing. And what I mean by that is if you do some sort of a threshold test on a track, but you never run on a track in your training, you're only running up and down mountains, it's probably going to be a little bit different than if you were to do a threshold test at 25% on the treadmill. So I would think about that. Um, Again, it's a bit unclear if they're trying to determine just their first and second ventilatory thresholds or their VO2 max. If you're trying to find your VO2 max, often it's a pretty aggressive, steep ramping protocol, which actually won't give you the best results always for your VT1 and 2 because you rush through.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I mean, like to be honest, for most people, the VO2 max really doesn't matter. What actually matters is knowing what your functional VO2 max is, what you're actually what your pace is or your power. I mean, if you're cycling, you're thinking about it that way. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I guess we could go into a lot of different directions with this. I don't know if that just confuses things. What do you think, John?
I think you're spot on. What I would say is, first and foremost, the training must transfer. You know,
Mm,
the if as all possible, like obviously not all of us live in places where we can, go out and climb ice routes every day, or we don't all live in Canmore, uh, and so like some of us have to be a little creative in the way we train. But for something like mountain running, like ideally your volume would hopefully reflect what you're training for. Especially like if you kind of know like, oh, this is going to be a course that has a lot more vertical, or oh, this is a pretty flat course. Like you want to look for training that's going to mimic that. And an extension of that would be you want to be doing your tests to ensure that, okay, my threshold is appropriate to the type of training I'm going to be doing.
Hmm.
I would throw out there, you'll probably have to, you would have to, well, I mean, there might be some athletes that have a pretty sweet home setup and they can do a VO2 max in their house. But
Hmm.
most people, I think, are going to go to a lab to get that done and they're going to do that protocol. I would honestly encourage someone, just kind of like you were pointing out, do their aerobic and anaerobic thresholds in one test, and then maybe in a separate test, do their VO2 max. If you're close to a city that has any type of college or university, they almost always have a sports physiology department.
Hmm.
And there's lots of undergraduates trying to get credits to graduate that will put you through a battery of tests for like $100. And if you're curious, that's a great way to go. I always encourage my athletes, if they do that, to try and do a drift test either right before or right after so they can kind of
Hmm.
correlate, like, hey, what did the drift test results give you? How did that correlate to the laboratory tests? And you'll actually see they're very close and they'll give you confidence moving forward. You don't have to always go back to the lab, but it is fun to go in there and you can get a whole bunch of tests
Hmm.
for honestly pretty small amount of money. So um,
Hmm.
that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe just to add just one little example, like being specific matters so much, and I've seen numerous athletes that have done like a VO2 or some sort of gas exchange test on a bike and then also on a treadmill, and you will get different results. And runners in particular often will struggle to get a good result um, on the bike. Cyclists seem to do better doing it on the treadmill versus so the other way around is a little bit better, but especially runners trying to do a gas exchange test on a bike, it often is going to give a different result.
Yeah. Yeah. Specificity matters.
Yep. Yep, definitely. Okay, next question here, John. So for the time restricted athlete who has a job, family, etc., whose weekly aerobic base time may be limited by outside factors, what is a good bare minimum floor number of aerobic base minutes that will keep you from regressing and allow you to hold ground? What do you think?
Ooh. um, let's first emphasize the fact that we're holding the line and we're not actually improving. We're not moving anything forward. We're simply holding the line. Um, and entropy, if you will, second law of thermodynamics says that things fall apart. And as we age, some of us more than others, we figure out that that line might actually increase. I think it was someone once said to me, don't get off the bus because you never know if you're going to be able to catch the bus. And so trying to maintain some amount of frequency with your training is critical. I think if I had to throw out a number, and this is a very generic number, and it could be that the person that asked this question is a very high level athlete and they maybe need some more hours to hold the line. I would say a bare minimum 4-ish hours a week. The fine print on that is that, look, that's just dealing with the aerobic side of the house. That's keeping your metabolic density, or your mitochondrial density, to keep that metabolic efficiency. That's not considering your strength needs. And though we absolutely like the cover charge to these endurance sports to get into the club is metabolic efficiency and mitochondrial density and that fat metabolism, strength is still a factor. And so, if someone can do 1 to 2 strength sessions a week, 1 to 2 aerobic sessions a week during the 5-day work week, and then on the weekends try and get a long day, that's okay. But you also need to be really realistic with yourself and understand that you're just kind of holding the line and you're not pushing things. And if you're there too long, it could be that, maybe you need to reevaluate your priorities. Or, it's maybe look at something different. I don't know. Hopefully that
Mhm.
doesn't come off as too elitist.
No, no, I don't think so at all. It's a good, it makes me think right now because a lot of athletes seem to be it's a time of year when people are getting sick as well. And on the converse, there's often concern about rushing to get back to training, um, when you're not quite 100% healthy. And first off, I would just say that, I mean, the priority should always be to first be healthy and then train. And it's futile to try and train through sickness. It just doesn't work. But on that note, once you're quite fit, I mean, if you have years or decades of you know, good quality training, it has very little effect, taking off even a month. I mean, you'll come back so quickly. Like, I think it's always internally we freak out when we have to stop, but it just doesn't matter because there's nothing you can do about it. So, I mean, all that I can think about with this person is just figure out how much you can do realistically and then do that much because it may not be that complicated.
Yes.
So that's my 2 cents. All right, well, I'll ask you another one, John. So I want to work through the 24-week mountaineering plan, but I work some 12 to 14-hour days. How can I stack workouts, rearrange, or what can I cut out to still be making forward progress? So I'm assuming they're just starting the 24-week mountaineering plan. Um, yeah, so that is a tricky one. What do you think?
Um, so the plan, and this is consistent with a lot of our plans, but definitely all of our mountaineering plans. They're all structured with Monday is a rest day, and that's because we assume someone's got Saturday, Sunday as their 2 days that are they're the most available with their schedule, and so that's when we stack the long workouts. One, and then two, if someone's training Tuesday through Sunday by the time they get to Monday, they're a little cooked and they're due for a rest day. And so, for those of you at home, if you need Sunday to do family stuff or you cannot train on Sundays, start the plan on a Sunday so that all of your weeks moving forward are all rest days. But for most people, assuming you can train Saturday and Sunday, and that's kind of your best days, like start the plan on a Monday. Um, uh, as far as 12 to 14 hours, like, um, like you've made decisions in life that resulted in that. You've also made a decision to train for, I'm assuming, this big mountaineering goal, which is why you chose the 24-week plan, which is a great plan and will get you very fit for your goals. I think that um, if it's important to you, you're going to find a way to get these workouts done. And if it's not important to you, I'm sure you'll come up with an excuse. And it's I personally, as someone who in a previous life worked a pretty demanding job, I would get up very early, not look at my email to make sure I didn't get sabotaged because I wish there was always something in there that probably wanted my attention. I would get my morning aerobic session, go to work, train till lunch, and if things weren't on fire, I could sneak in a little bit of time during lunch, work the rest of the day and get my 9 to 10 hours, and then I would go home and maybe train again or go to the rock gym. And like you're gonna, it sucked, but like it also allowed me to train for some cool trips, and so I don't regret it. And um, I would just encourage people to kind of figure out that balance. If you got to trim some stuff back, um, you know, I think we talked about it in the last question, like, oh, you might drop an aerobic one per week. The long
Mhm.
stuff on the weekends is really important, especially if you're looking at like a more expedition style climb of something. And so those 2 days back to back are arguably very critical. I would almost encourage someone to kind of just like take a realistic look at like the program if you have the program and say like, can I follow this? Because if I can't, you might want to
Mhm.
rethink like the training goal. Like it could make sense, like, hey, this isn't the year to go to Denali. Maybe it's the year to like go to the Ruth Gorge and do something that requires a different training plan, or it's a year to go to the Canadian Rockies and climb something off the parkways. Like
Mhm.
fortunately for us, there's a lot of cool climbing in the world, and not all of it requires the same training plan. So I don't know.
Mhm.
What do you think?
I think that's a great answer. I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think we
Okay.
covered that perfectly.
All right. What else we got? Let's see here. Um, could you talk about the general impact of other sports on developing
Hmm.
aerobic base? For example, soccer,
Mm.
tennis, golf, baseball, etc. Do they need to be curtailed, or is there an ideal part of the season where they could fit into an endurance-focused training plan? So,
Well, I guess first off, soccer, tennis, golf, and baseball, I think was the other one. Uh, Those are all pretty different sports. Soccer, I can't, I'm probably wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that in an average, match, you could easily run, um, at least 10K, 6 miles, uh, for those not on the metric system. So, soccer is really an aerobic sport. I would say the biggest thing about soccer is, you have a lot of sprints, so you actually do a lot of high intensity work. Tennis is similar, I would say even more so, trending towards like very high intensity interval training style, but really with a high demand on ability to recover between bouts. So yeah, I think with those two sports, I mean, it would probably, if you're already participating in those sports at a reasonable level, you probably have a pretty good aerobic base as it is. Golf, maybe not so much. I'm not an expert in golf, but my perception is it's not the most aerobically demanding. Um, I mean, you could get quite tired because it would be a long day on your feet, and that could be tiring. Um, Baseball, I'm not as familiar with that sport, but I'd imagine, you have some very high intensity sprint efforts in between, maybe less so than soccer, tennis. So what would you do to fit these into your season? Uh, I mean, if you have a specific objective you're trying to train for, I would try and have these objectives, these sports, as far away as possible from your objective so that in the months at least leading up to, let's say you're going to go to Denali, you're allocating like 3 to 6 months of quality training specific to Denali. And then you could focus on, say, soccer, tennis, in that off season. But it's probably going to be quite tricky to do them all. I mean, just because you'll simply run out of time. Um, yeah, what do you think, John?
I would say uh, training, because we're not exercising, we're training. Training is as much about what you're supposed to be doing as what you're not supposed to be doing. And job one is always to do the things you're supposed to be doing. And so if you're getting all your workouts done for the week, then you can decide, okay, do I have time to sprinkle in this other stuff? Can I go, um, play tennis with my friend? Or can I go, I've got a Thursday soccer club. In theory, yes, but I think it's no different than when you see people who they'll email the website and ask about, hey, can I add in some extra this or some extra that? And in general, the rule is that with modulation within training, there needs to be easier days so that you can actually go harder on the hard days. I think a lot of people self-sabotage not knowing it because they're maybe not going as easy as they should on the easy days, or they don't realize that that little extra something added just a little bit of extra training stress to them so that the next day when they had maybe a strength session they couldn't lift as heavy as they needed, or if they had some very important intervals they couldn't hit those intervals. And so we always need to be kind of like self-checking in, like what's the goal, like does this fit into the goal. I totally agree, like what you were saying, like hey, can we push this away from the season. It's not completely clear to me from the question, like if they're talking about a year-round thing, but
Mm.
like uh if you're training for more winter sports, all of the stuff on this list makes sense in the summer, and so it would make sense, and I think that would be great for someone. um if you I think if people are paying attention to like how they're feeling after their efforts and what it kind of costs them, and they can kind of gauge like, okay, this playing soccer for an hour does this to me. You can kind of decide like, oh, maybe I can substitute this for the recovery effort that was programmed in my program, or oh, maybe this playing golf on the weekend is not going to affect my 2 hour pack carry, other than my significant other is going to be mad at me when I'm gone all day because I played golf and then went and carried a pack for 4 hours, which I think I had a guy a couple years ago who ran into that problem a lot. So I think I think trying to figure out like, does it fit into the plan, and just reminding yourself like what's more important. The last thing I would say is always be aware of the potential for something going sideways and affecting your training goal. Like I've lost count the number of athletes I've had break a clavicle mountain biking with their friends on Tuesday, and as a result, they couldn't go climb their mountain in July.
Mm.
And so, just always a word of caution, or just be honest with yourself. What's more important, mountain biking with your friends on Tuesday or climbing Mount Rainier in July? You can decide what you're going to do. So,
Mm.
how'd we do?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's great. I think those sports, especially, I mean, it wasn't listed here, but mountain biking in particular is a great way to injure yourself. Um, so
Well, here's
yeah.
another one. We got another question. We'll follow along. Is this individual trains judo and jujitsu once a week, which eats
Mhm.
into the endurance training. Do you have other athletes with the second sport? How do you recommend managing total fatigue load, balancing time in Z1, 2, 3, 4 across all disciplines, and structuring the weekly cadence? So that would be just another one, I think,
Mm.
kind of in similar
Yeah,
vein,
it's
like.
it's a question we always get is how do you do it all and be good at everything at the same time? And it's just not possible. Like, unfortunately, uh, I mean, to be a little bit specific to the question, for this individual, likely you're doing a lot of short, high intensity bouts anyway, so you likely definitely don't need any kind of like, uh, super high intensity type training mixed in. But if you're training for a 5K, you probably will because you need that race specific intensity. So but if you're training for an ultra marathon or mountaineering, I mean, you probably don't need to touch. We don't know how they're delineating their zones, but zone four likely with that. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Agree with everything. My advice to this person, anyone else, tap early, tap often. Don't get injured. Speaking of injuries, tap early, tap often.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, as someone who's trained with a lot of guys that were also training for jits, just injuries happen. Be careful. Um, if you were to, depending on how, if you're just rolling once, twice a week, just to kind of keep the volume and kind of your staying fluent with your technique. I think you could stack it on a Tuesday, perhaps. Like if you did your strength in the morning, in the evening, you could go to jits and roll. And yeah, it would be a larger training effect for the day. But the next day in the program usually is a recovery day, anyways. And so that could be a way maybe to sneak it in because you're doing the strength training first. You're fresh for that. And then, yeah, you might be dragging a little for jits, but like you're just adding to the cumulative fatigue for the day,
Mm,
and you're going to recover the next day anyways. So that's kind of a sneaky way to do it. Uh, be aware of like some classes are more technique oriented. So yeah, there's a little bit of rolling, but for the most part, it's not a bad session. And then I've seen other classes where, it's you're just getting grinded for an hour. And so in that case, be more aware that okay, that was a lot of Z3, Z4. As long as you're respecting the bigger percentages of like aerobic versus anaerobic work for the week, and we're keeping that anaerobic component very small, we'll still probably see some aerobic improvement over time,
mm,
would be my assumption. So
mhm.
tap early, tap
Good.
often.
Okay, good answer. Next,
Uh,
next question here. It's kind of going to be a similar question again, but we'll go through it here quickly. For multi-sport athletes in a very, very different disciplines, as a firefighter and endurance sport enthusiast, how would you recommend training for both building and keeping strength, especially upper body for females, and high intensity work in an anaerobic state while also building endurance. Would you recommend separate blocks or training them together? So I think the question is, should I be training strength and endurance at the same time? Yeah, let me know your thoughts, John, but I think that's essentially what the question is relating
I
to.
I get that. I think my sense is that maybe they have to maintain some standards for work, being a
Yeah.
firefighter,
Mm,
which would be similar to kind of some of the military athletes we train, where they've got to like hit some certain numbers kind of year round or get in trouble with their employment, while at the same time having some external interests that are more endurance based, I think is the impression I'm getting.
hmm
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've actually worked with uh, numerous firefighters, and in my experience, for a lot of them, the actual required strength requirements are not that excessive to where they're at. So I guess it depends. Like if you're new into this, into firefighting, then you might have to be passing some tests, some qualifications, or something like that. That's a different story. But if this is just as far as your job, you probably are most interested in not getting injured on the job because you're going to be lifting some things awkwardly in a rush. So definitely, I mean, I would keep strength up always, and same with your aerobic training. Likely, if you do two strength sessions a week, separated by a few days, that would be more than enough. You could maybe do three. I think for a lot of firefighters, if you're working like a 24-hour shift, you can often easily do your strength work at the fire hall. That's a lot easier than going for like a 2-hour run. And then you can plan like your aerobic training on your days off. What do you think, John?
Totally,
You probably
totally
have some
agree.
experience here too.
Um, I think you can definitely train both. In fact, I would argue that probably with maybe one or two exceptions, almost all of our athletes, whether being coached or following a stock plan, get some
Mhm.
strength per week. And so you're going to have them both as part of any training plan. I think maybe to guess a little at what they're asking, but my assumption is that you should have both as part of a plan. Maybe which one you're expecting to see improvements in
Mm,
might change block to block. Like I might have 8 weeks where my focus is the aerobic. I still have some strength in there. I could probably still be working on some of my pull ups, but by the end of that block, I should see some type of aerobic improvement, whether it's a higher threshold or a faster speed at threshold, some type of improvement. Um, but I could also do a strength block where okay, I've got a test coming up in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or I've got the some of the military guys we work with have a semi-yearly test they have to do where they have to deadlift a 3 rep max,
mhm,
and so they might do kind of a build up for that in advance of that test, so they're deadlifting more to kind of get ready while maintaining their aerobic base that they have, and they might actually start doing some faster running to be able to do their either mile and a half or 2 mile or 5 kilometer,
mhm,
pick your units. And so having some, I think everyone should always have like some knowledge in regards to what's the goal of this particular block? What am I focused on? What is something maybe I'm not as focused on, but I'm still holding the line on. And I think that's totally appropriate. The only other thing I would add is if this is a female firefighter, I think that she could probably keep some amount of like pull
mhm,
up upper body work in there, even on the aerobic days, if there was enough space in between the aerobic session and the pull up session. And I think that would be totally appropriate. Like,
mhm,
especially if that's something they've really had to work hard to develop. So,
mhm. Yeah, and I think, I mean, you can get quite into the weeds of strength training, but I do think too, like if you're have a smaller stature and a difficult time uh, maintaining like lean muscle mass, you might want to gear your training more towards slightly higher, reps and sets, right? As opposed to if you're just trying to maintain and also have a good quality uh like endurance training, you can maintain a lot of strength with just maximal strength training, like I mean, even just 4 sets of 4 reps, I mean, will go a long way. So I think
Yeah,
it depends where you are and where your deficiency is. Um, but
definitely,
anyway,
definitely.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Next question is, how do you balance both ultra marathons in the context 100-mile plus and big mountain objectives? Do you split per season? I assume training for both in a season would have detrimental effects. These sound like they could be pretty similar objectives, but I'm thinking, John, they might like if we differentiate with big mountain as in slow, like with a big pack. I'm assuming versus like running unburdened. Yeah. What do you think?
I would go back a little to what I said earlier about
Mm,
figure out what's important to you, figure out what's in, and if any of those are in conflict, maybe you need to revisit what your priorities are, either over the length of a training block, a year, however you want to break it up.
hmm
And I think that, someone who's training for, say, a Denali or just a big mountain where they have a big heavy pack, I think that they can train for that, be successful. And if they give themselves enough time before their 100 miler, for example, if they run it in the fall, for sure. Like I think that's
hmm
totally appropriate. I think I don't know about you, but I've had some athletes that
I,
have done
I
that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I actually think those objectives are pretty similar. And if you're in shape to run a 100-mile race in mountainous terrain, you probably only need some very specific work for a trip like Denali. Maybe some heavier strength training, just get used to the rigors of it. Hauling a sled, some weighted sessions. But I mean, even if you're training for a big mountain, you're not doing weighted sessions 6, 7 days a week because it's just not an effective use of time. So uh, I think they're actually relatively similar. And then again, if you're training for an ultra marathon and I don't know, let's just say your running economy is terrible, then for sure you'd probably want to put a little bit more efforts into how are you going to improve your running economy, which is going to have no impact on climbing a big peak that's a grind kind of thing. So,
I think that would
um,
be a good example
yeah.
of where because we get these emails sometimes with the website.
Mm,
Someone schemos all winter and we'll say Utah. We're not pointing any fingers because it's a great place to schemo. And then they want to do really good in
mm,
uh, you know, an ultra race coming up quickly, perhaps also in Utah. Perhaps they want to use
mm,
it. Perhaps it's the speed goat and they want to use it as a qualifier for UTMB. And they do all their volume all winter on their skis because they're building this amazing aerobic base.
mm,
And then they jump into speed goat and oh man, I totally sucked. What happened? Like that, I think that would be a good example of where it's too close together
mm,
and the transferability in regards to the specific needs for the second goal were not
mm,
accomplished in the first goal. And so always taking a step back and looking at the big picture, the 30,000 foot
mm,
view for people, I think is very important to be like understanding like how is this goal going to help me for my next goal?
mm,
But is it also going to maybe hurt me for this next goal? And in that case, do I need to reevaluate if I do them both in the same season or not?
mhm,
So I think taking a step back and just looking at kind of how things lay out for you, big picture, you don't have to have exact dates, but just having
mhm,
some kind of like key points in your bigger picture really helps shape what happens in between those events and that ultimately shapes what are the workouts day to day. So I like to start from a high level view and then move into the micro. So
mhm,
I would encourage that for anyone.
mhm. Yeah, and I think also just thinking about like, is this the first 100-mile race you've done, or have you raced 12 of them already? Because again, like if the objective is to you're building up to that distance, you're probably going to need to put a lot more focus into just running um, to get that done. Whereas if you have a decade of ultra running under your belt, you can probably get away with a lot more. But then again, you're probably going to know that too.
Yes. This next one's for you. You're named it exactly. So, uh, assuming I already have the necessary technical skills, or as I like to call them, the dark arts, what is the most effective training approach for completing traditionally multi-day alpine climbing objectives in a single day? Parentheses, fast and light alpinism. Would it be better to follow a training running focused training plan or a mountaineering specific plan or some combination of the two? I've been following Coach Leif Godberson on social media, and the alpine climbing objectives he is able to complete in a single day is super impressive. I would love to know how to train towards that level of fitness and efficiency. I would also, so Mr. Godberson, lay it on us and
Well,
tell us all
I
your
think
secrets.
first I have to say I appreciate that you're following me because I think I have a pretty boring social media account. Um, but thank you. And but I think that the question of, how do you train for these things? It's a good question. Um, First off, I would say that when you're trying to do a big objective in a condensed time frame, the fitness is only one part of it. And for me personally, a huge components are one, uh, choosing the best conditions possible so that you set yourself up for success right from the get-go. I think that is really critical. I mean, if it's mostly a rock route, it's not quite so complicated, but anything that involves snow or ice, it's enormous difference, right? On, travel, the approach, conditions. Anyway, we could get way into that, but conditions really matter. The other big part is tactics and your systems and your gear. Uh, if it's a truly technical objective, I mean, that has to be really dialed. Otherwise, it just doesn't matter how fit you are, you will fail. So you have to spend a lot of time and figure that out. Um, as far as training goes, I would suggest that those two plans are not that different. Likely, you don't really need to do a lot of intensity work. I mean, to be honest, the training that I do is really quite boring, probably. I just do a lot of consistency and a lot of volume, and then if I have a specific thing I would like to do, typically 6 to 8 weeks out, I will try to fit a few sessions in a week that are very specific um, to that objective. Uh, so yeah, I don't know if I'm answering that question very well. John, you have some experience though in the
Well,
the
hold on
fast and
before we
light,
let you
but
off the
yeah,
hook. Before we let you off the hook,
yeah.
let's say I was interested in doing a winter ascent of Mount Robson and I saw the conditions were coming up aligning. What would I do specifically, maybe to prep for that?
Well, I think first it's really quite simple. Like if you want to do something like Mount Robson or Mont Blanc, I mean, both are actually quite comparable in terms of relief. If you do Mont Blanc from town, I think about 3,000 meters. I'm probably wrong a little bit on that, but give or take. Uh, you want to be able to do 3,000 meters comfortably in a session on a trail. So if you can't do that in a comfortable day, then that's the first thing you have to do because once you factor in a little bit of modest altitude, um, and perhaps mildly technical terrain and having to wear boots and all this stuff like that's step number one. I would say. And this individual said that they already have the technical skills, and I mean that's the biggest part because
Uh,
when you're trying to push the pace, you have to be operating really sub-maximally. Like you cannot be operating at your limit. It just won't work, and it's also, I mean, quite would be quite dangerous, in that environment. So yeah, like try and have your technical level well above the objective, and then have your physical level also well above in like an ideal environment, and then you can merge the two. The other thing I would say though is it doesn't always like doing things in a single push can be good if it allows you to maybe bring less gear and it makes sense for a given objective. But I do think more and more that it's actually can be better and a more enjoyable experience to if something's going to take you over 20 or especially over 24 hours, you can also just bivvy. Like if you sleep, 4 to 6 hours and, a modern bivvy system is so light, you might actually be faster and you can enjoy the experience more and you won't have a horrible, alpine hangover that's going to take weeks to recover from because you didn't sleep for 2 days and then you had to drive home or something like this, yeah, I don't know. What do you think, John?
I, he asked for your opinion, so I'm trying to duck this question. I agree with
Because
you
you
in
you do
that.
have, yeah, I mean, but you certainly do have experience, I think, um, especially in the Alaska range, setting yourself up for success, watching conditions, and then trying to go execute. Um, yeah, I mean, tell us a
Yeah.
bit about that.
So you you know approximately when the conditions are going to be good, and this would apply for anything, not just Alaska. But
Hmm.
like if we're trying to do something in the Ruth Gorge, we know it's probably the last 2 weeks of April, and so that's our delivery date. That's our we want to peak on kind of this block of days. So we'll set that in the calendar and we work backwards to hopefully, I don't know, the fall, September, October. Hopefully I'm coming out of rock season, so I'm kind of strong, or I'm training some rock climbing there so that as I transition into ice season, I'm feeling strong and then I can actually kind of apply that same fitness from rock climbing into the ice climbing over the winter, while at the same time looking at potentially either doing a bit of a strength cycle to kind of build myself up in advance of maybe the more sport specific ME stuff with the pack on, even though I might not actually be carrying a heavy back on a lot of these routes in the Ruth
Hmm.
Gorge. I'm still going to be faster if I suddenly have a much lighter bag versus what I was training with. And I think to your point, getting out and testing in ideally the same systems are very close so that you can have confidence that when you go to the place, like, oh, there's not much difference. Like I used to go to ice climb in Highlight, Montana, which is
Hmm.
not as cool as Canmore. But I would go there in March when it was warm and most people were wearing their skinny light boots, and I would wear my double boots just to like get some
Hmm.
volume in those before I flew to Alaska next month. And so looking for ways to transfer the training, kind of like we talked about in the podcast, like
Hmm.
the closer you can get to what you're training for, the easier the objective's going to be. Um,
Hmm.
and so,
And
yeah.
well, I also think too, like it's often referred to as fast and light alpinism, but it's really not that fast. Like it when you actually watch when you're in the moment doing the activity, it's pretty slow and it's pretty rare. I mean, even maybe you break into a slight jog for a little section, but still, it's at the most a light jog. Um, so yeah, I guess it depends on the context, and I'm really talking about this in the context of technical terrain. I mean, for sure, if it's like a trail, then yeah, of course you can run quite fast and that down there. But thinking about this in terms of truly technical terrain, like the quality of your movement and the security of your movement will dictate your speed ultimately more than the fitness. I would suggest like the fitness will make a huge difference once you're really proficient in the technical terrain. But without the really high technical capacities and confidence, I think it has very little use. And maybe it can even get you into trouble because it can like bring you into this super tenuous, sketchy situation, and then you have to kind of deal, uh, yeah, with it.
It's
Yeah.
just because you're number one in your Peloton class doesn't mean you're ready to
Hmm.
go race the Tour de France or
Hmm.
or even your local crit, like, or
Mm.
like the being fitness is part of it, but it's not all of it. And it's
Hmm.
it's why you see some people climbing some of the hardest stuff in the world that, their gym numbers aren't anything amazing, but they do have built the capacities that they need in the areas that are critical, like their aerobic
Hmm.
metabolism.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and well,
I
I
would
was just
say,
gonna say.
okay, go ahead, go
Well,
ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I also think there's a ton of value in doing things like the slow, casual way to really enjoy the objectives too. Also to learn the objective, um, often when you see someone do something quickly, I mean, they probably leave out, myself included, a lot of the background that actually how many times they had done that objective prior. And I mean, it could be like maybe it's like 10 times they've already done this route, and you didn't know that, and it appears they just went up and jumped out of their car and ran up this route, and often that isn't the case. There's exceptions, but often it's not the whole picture.
Yes, people underrepresent and overreport.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so for this person, they might consider
Mm.
a bit of like a running program in the summer, maybe topping off some of that aerobic base there, taking advantage of the nice weather. And then they might do some aspects of their mountaineering training at some point over the winter as they build up for like a spring, alpinism trip.
Mhm.
But there's definitely going to be stuff that we don't sell in any of our stock plans that they should be
Mhm.
doing as part of them becoming proficient and able to do these routes fast, at the
Mhm.
level they need to be. So that question, and
Yeah.
I would say any other question where people have more specific application to themselves in regards to like where they are right now as an athlete and what they need to do. We're more than happy to offer phone consults, and they can even call and request you and talk to you about all your alpinism. And
Or
so
you,
it's
they can also request.
and they could do your homework, kids. But point being, if you do want to talk further to any one of the coaches on staff, we do phone consults, and it's a great way to get a lot of information in like 30 minutes or however long you want to talk. So
Hmm. I'll just add one more thing because this it's actually a common question anyway, that I get in the mountaineering training plan. Often those sessions are geared towards like hiking and some stuff like that, and they don't always specify running. But I mean, mountain running, running on trails, even on flat, is a really, really good way to train for being in the mountains. The issue often is that it takes a long time to build up to being able to handle the running, so it's not going to, damage your body. But it's a really good unloaded way to get fit. Like I think it's kind of unbeatable in many ways. So
I
that was
agree
all.
totally.
Okay, well, I'm
We
going to
got
ask
time for
you.
an Emmy question or not? We're getting
Yeah,
close to our time.
I'll ask you one more here.
Oh,
So, could you clarify what a Stairmaster training block and workouts would look like, say 8 weeks long? Is there any progression? Is it zone two? Why or why not do zone three to threshold work on it? Always weighted or not? Thank you. I'm just interested to understand how best to integrate it into the training plan. Um, I think I asked you a challenging one, John, because it's maybe not a
yeah,
lot of
this
context here.
not a lot of context. I would say that first and foremost, all the stock plans we sell have, if it's appropriate, has some Stairmaster in it as an option to train. I would remind everyone that metabolism is independent of activity, and so unless the workout calls for something like, oh, you're trying to gain a lot of vertical
Mhm.
today, it's not a deal breaker if you don't have a Stairmaster or access to a Stairmaster. We try and write all those workouts with some amount of flexibility into them. Some people train on only an incline treadmill. I had an athlete who trained in his stairwell living in Florida. He did a lot of stairs. And so there's ways to work this. In regards to like how to integrate the Stairmaster in, it partially the question I would have is like, well, what are we training for? Like, is this a more mountaineering training? And so we're probably doing some weighted pack work on the Stairmaster. Or is this more like we're training for an ultra running objective and we're trying to move fast on the Stairmaster? Both of those things really matter. I think another question is like, where is this athlete right now? Or like, is this going to be their first ultra? Or they are seasoned veteran? Like, I mean, are they ready for the types
Mhm.
of volume that you can get on a Stairmaster without getting injured? Like, these are kind of some of the things I would want to know to be able to answer that. What would you add to that?
I probably wouldn't add much. I mean, I feel like there's so much context here, like zone two, zone three. Again, it depends how you're defining your zones, and what you're training for. Uh, yeah, I'm not sure. That's a tough one. I would almost hesitate to say anything much more about it.
I will, for those of you listening to this that did ask your question in Reddit, we'll try
Hmm.
and you can always message us, or maybe we'll try and comment in the thread
Hmm.
and see if we can get some more information from you. But like, we will try and sort this out. So,
Hmm.
um,
Or we can
you
do
want to
another
answer
one of
this one real
these.
quick? Okay. For yes, we could do part two. For recovery workouts, how important is it to get yours up into zone one heart rate? This person has a bunch in their current
Mm.
mountaineering plan that recommend an hour of walking at zone one, but to be honest,
Mm.
it's tough for them to get up into zone one. Thoughts?
I mean, it probably doesn't matter at all because if you're doing this to help facilitate recovery, I mean, all that you're trying to do is get some light blood flow, some gentle movement. It could be yoga you could do instead. There's no need to get your heart rate into a zone for a recovery workout. I mean, get it above resting heart rate, but it's going to be much easier to overdo a recovery workout than it is to underdo it. Um, is my thought.
Great
What do you
thought.
think, John?
Totally agree. 100%.
Okay.
Yes. How'd we do? Did we get enough? Were you out of time?
I think we did well. I think, yeah, we can see if we can answer some of these other questions on another episode. Or people can let us
Perfect.
know if they are really keen to have another one answered.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for your time, sir. And
All
thank
right.
you,
Thank you,
everyone, for
John.
tuning in. And as always, if you've got questions, don't hesitate to email the coach at Evoke Endurance. So, on that note, thank you all for tuning in.